Earlier today in the White House, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, became the very first public leader to meet with Donald Trump since his inauguration. And obviously the top of the agenda was the ceasefire that Trump and his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to the Middle East helped facilitate and negotiate. And according to all reports, Trump is trying to pressure Netanyahu to maintain that ceasefire when many people in Israel, including people in Netanyahu's own party, are demanding that he abandon it and instead return to bombing and even invading Gaza. Here is a part of the video where Donald Trump is greeting Netanyahu today as he visits the White House. All right, there's those two shaking hands in front of a car. And obviously, it's pretty telling that that's the first leader in the entire world that Trump decides that he's going to meet with. Here's the BBC description of it from February 4th. That's today. Trump to host Netanyahu in this first foreign leader visit of the second term, which is the video we just showed you. Now, the question about what exactly is going on in this visit is something that the Israeli media has been very openly and assertively analyzing and trying to discuss, because the question of what Netanyahu really wants from the United States, I think, is in doubt. When they signed this peace deal, he had a lot of people in his cabinet to his right who wanted to keep going in Gaza. And in fact, some of the extremists resigned from his government in protest of this peace deal, wanting to go and kill the rest of Hamas, in their words, kill more Gazans, destroy the 6 or 7% of buildings in Gaza that have not already yet been destroyed. And yet Netanyahu told them, look, I'm being pressured by the United States to do this deal, but don't worry, the second stage of the deal, which involves us withdrawing from most of Gaza, if not all of Gaza, and the return of other hostages, don't worry, we're not really going to do that. We're just going to get some of our hostages back and then keep bombing. And Trump has staked a claim in his credibility. He trumpeted this peace deal that he negotiated, that his envoy negotiated. And obviously, if that comes undone, that will look like one of Trump's accomplishments that he's been touting has been illusory, because it's not a real ceasefire. So there definitely is pressure on Netanyahu to continue with the ceasefire, but the question, of course, is what is he getting in return? Haaretz, the Israeli daily, on February 2nd, said the following, quote, Netanyahu comes to Washington to kill Trump's Gaza deal. Will the president let him? Quote, in order to get the remaining hostages to their families, Trump will have to do something difficult, to reject a plane load of lies, excuses, false promises, and shiny distractions from Netanyahu and his right-hand man, Ron Dermer. What Netanyahu and Dermer want is one thing and one thing only, to minimize any risk to Netanyahu's hold on power. This is their life's mission, and right now, they view Trump as a potential threat because of his demand to end the war in Gaza and bring back all the hostages. Netanyahu's far-right ruling coalition partners have promised to bring down the government if the hostage deal secured by Trump is fully implemented, and therefore, Netanyahu is determined to blow up the deal. This isn't some conspiracy theory being spread online by his opponents. It's a promise Netanyahu's biggest supporters are proudly making on the airwaves in Israel every day. The prime minister's loudest defenders say openly that he wants to destroy the deal and renew the war by the end of February. Dermer and Netanyahu are both smooth political operators with lots of experience in tricking and fooling American presidents. They had it easy with Joe Biden, whose Zionist convictions and love for Israel made it impossible for him to comprehend for a long time the possibility that Israel's leader simply doesn't care that much about the hostages' fate. Trump is in a much better position ahead of Netanyahu's arrival to the White House. The real question is whether Trump, who is surrounded by blind admirers of Netanyahu, with a very shallow understanding of Israeli public opinion, is aware of all of this. That is indeed the question. The night before this meeting, that was last night, the New York Times, lo and behold, as it's done for 15 years now, warned that Iran is very close to developing a nuclear weapon, according to U.S. intelligence. Here's the New York Times. Iran is developing plans for faster, cruder weapons, U.S. concludes, As Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel prepares to meet with President Trump, the question of whether to strike Iran's facilities or negotiate with Tehran appears certain in under debate. New intelligence about Iran's nuclear program has convinced American officials. By the way, I just want to say here that before I read this, if you remember in 2002, 2003, some of you who are not yet old enough to remember probably know anyway that the run-up to the war entailed nothing but the New York Times printing on its front pages claims by anonymous intelligence officials, and sometimes even named ones, about the Iraqi nuclear program, the Iraqi biological and chemical weapons program. And once the war was sold on that basis, and it turned out that that was all false, the New York Times issued a mea culpa saying, oh, we will never do that again. We're not going to just publish intelligence claims on our front page without investigating and confirming if it's true. This article reads almost exactly like those 2002 and 2003 articles. Listen to this. Quote, new intelligence about Iran's nuclear program has convinced American officials that a secret team of the country's scientists is exploring a faster, if cruder approach to developing an atomic weapon if Tehran's leadership decides to race for a bomb, according to current and former American officials. U.S. officials said they continue to believe that Iran and its supreme leader had not made the decision to develop a weapon, officials said in interviews over the past month. But new intelligence suggests that as Iran's proxy forces have been eviscerated and its missiles have failed to pierce American and Israeli defenses, the military is seriously exploring new options to deter a U.S. or Israeli attack. I mean, it's just nothing but U.S. officials say there's no evidence presented. I have shown you on the show before 15 years worth when I did the debate with Alan Dershowitz in New York City on whether we should bomb Iran. I went through all those accounts as well. Every headline throughout every year, Netanyahu says Iran is weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. This is always the scaremongering tactic that the Israelis use to influence American public opinion and American presidents. And whether what Netanyahu really wants is a pledge from Trump to attack Iran, and thus there's these intelligence leaks, or whether he wants is what Trump promised, which we're about to show you, I think that's unclear. But clearly Netanyahu is going to get a lot with his Washington visit because he always does. Now, here is Trump in the White House today with Netanyahu, and you see Netanyahu there kind of smiling in a very sort of pleased with himself manner. And before we get to that, before we get to Netanyahu joining Trump in the Oval Office, here is Trump in the Oval Office behind his desk answering questions about what he thinks the resolution should be in Gaza.
President, will you continue to press for this idea that Jordan and Egypt can take Palestinians from Gaza?
Yeah, I would like to see Jordan. I'd like to see Egypt take some look. The Gaza thing has not worked. It's never worked. And I feel very differently about Gaza than a lot of people. I think they should get a good, fresh, beautiful piece of land, and we get some people to put up the money to build it and make it nice and make it habitable and enjoyable and make it a home.
They don't want to leave, though. Palestinians say they don't want to leave.
I don't know how they could want to stay. It's a demolition site. Well, they may have said that, but a lot of people said things to me. They said they wouldn't take anybody back in Venezuela, and right now they're flying them right back into Venezuela. And a lot of people, and they're doing the right thing in Venezuela. The Panama Canal is an active discussion right now, and they said things about that. And virtually everything that's been said has been incorrectly stated based on the result.
Doesn't that amount to forcibly displacing those people from Gaza?
I don't think so. I think if they had the opportunity, they'd love it. If they had an alternative to Gaza, they have no alternative right now. I mean, they're there because they have no alternative. What do they have? It is a big pile of rubble right now. I mean, have you seen the pictures of it? Have you been there? It's terrible to live. Who can live like that? And very dangerous. There's shooting all over the place. There's bombing all over the place on both sides. No, I would think if they had an option of moving to an area, either in a large group or various smaller groups, and take care of the close to 2 million people, I would think that they would be thrilled to do it. They have no, when you say about the Gaza Strip, they don't have an option.
I remember at the beginning of the war, Israeli war on Gaza in October of 2023, there were a lot of people talking about how there were all these extremist statements being made by pro-Palestinian protesters. And the reporter, Jeremy Lafredo, who ended up being arrested in Israel, he's been on our show, and others went to these pro-Israel protests and interviewed on American streets a bunch of extremists saying things like, we have to turn Gaza into rubble, we have to turn it into a parking lot, we have to drive these people out and have Jews take it over all of Gaza and build, seaside apartments or oceanside hotels. And I remember being told, you shouldn't be promoting these. These are just fringe extremists. They don't represent Israeli public opinion. You're trying to make it seem like these hateful bigots and extremists who are saying flatten all of Gaza are somehow representative of Israeli public opinion. They ended up being very representative of Israeli public opinion. Because that, in fact, as Donald Trump says, is what Gaza is. It's a demolition site. Everything there is destroyed. All civilian life is obliterated. And yet the U.S. government was lying under Biden for 15 months saying, oh, don't worry, Israel's conducting a very targeted campaign. They're trying to flatten Gaza, and Gaza's completely flattened. So he's right about that. And I think in Donald Trump's mind, he envisions himself as this sort of peacemaker who's going to come in and finally resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In his mind, if they stay in Gaza, Palestinians, or in the West Bank, you're never going to get peace. And so he has this vision where you're going to build some nice space for them in Egypt and in Jordan, new homes, new developments, put them in camps, I guess, because Egypt and Jordan isn't just going to let people in Gaza and the West Bank come into their countries and be constrained. The Palestinian population in Jordan in particular are very mistreated. And the Jordanians and the Egyptians are adamant that they don't want them in their country, in part because they don't want to help Israel ethnically cleanse that land. And Trump seems to think that, they're just waiting to go to some other place. They're very unhappy where they are. And of course they are unhappy where they are. Israel has destroyed their entire society in an unprecedented way that we haven't seen in the 21st century. But the idea that they're just all clamoring to give over that land to Israel, let Israel build Trump towers all across the Gaza Strip with golf courses and nice views of the water, you're going to cause a regional conflagration if you try and do that. And Trump seems to think that there's no connection that Palestinians have to this land. They have an incredibly intense and religious and cultural connection to that land. And there's no way, at least peacefully, to make them leave. You're going to talk about not just ethnic cleansing of the kind Trump is, by definition, advocating. He's saying get all the Arabs out of Gaza and rebuild it and give it to the Israelis and let the Gazans go somewhere else permanently. You're going to be talking about military force to ethnically cleanse Gaza, one of the most horrific war crimes we've seen in decades that the United States would be doing along with Israel if this plan comes to fruition. Here is Trump sitting next to Netanyahu while he says something very similar.
How many people are you thinking about?
All of them. I mean, we're talking
All of
about
them.
probably 1,000,007 people, 1,007,000, maybe 1,000,008. But I think all of them, I think they'll be resettled in areas where they can live a beautiful life and not be worried about dying every day. Wait.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
you support building settlements, Jewish settlements back in Gaza in the next years?
Say it.
Building settlements, Jewish settlements back in Gaza in the next year. Do you support this?
I don't see it happening. It's too dangerous for people. Nobody can go there. It's too dangerous. Nobody wants to be there. Warriors don't want to be there. Soldiers don't want to be there. How can you have people go back? You're saying go back into Gaza now? The same thing's going to happen. It'll only be death. The best way to do it is you go out and you get beautiful, open areas with the sunlight coming through, and you build something nice. And they are not going to want to. They are not going to want to go back to Gaza.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, what is your message?
Now, if it were true, as Trump seems to be assuming, that Palestinians have no connection to the land, that it's kind of like if you're living in Ohio, when it gets kind of cold, you just move to Florida, you don't really care, you have no connection, it's nice in Florida, there's new developments there. If that's how Palestinians thought, maybe Trump would be right. But that's not how they think. And to sit there next to Benjamin Netanyahu while he smirks and Trump talks about how Gaza is in rubble when the person who turned it into rubble with the help of the United States government and Joe Biden, who paid for it and armed it, is sitting there next to him and saying, we have to get these Gazans out. And obviously that means having the Israelis get that land is kind of sickening to watch. Now, we'll see how it happens. Trump cares a lot about the Saudis. He cares a lot about the Emiratis and the Qataris and the Jordanians and the Egyptians. And they've always said that they would not tolerate having the Palestinians ethnically cleansed, certainly not going to their countries. But the Saudis are adamant that normalization with Israel requires a two-state solution. I don't trust these Arab tyrants, and I don't think their conviction, their commitment to the Palestinian people is particularly authentic, but the populations in those countries absolutely do. And it's almost inconceivable to watch normalization of the kind Trump wants in that region, and that Trump thinks is vital to American interests. It's impossible to imagine that happening, while the United States' formal position is that the Palestinians need to be ethnically cleansed from Gaza and even the West Bank, and that land needs to be handed over to Israel. There's just no way that that region could sustain that kind of a solution, even if those Arab governments responded to it. So we'll see where this goes. Obviously, right now, it is the solution that Trump's talking about is not a solution at all, not strategically, not morally, and it's not practical either. But at the very least, at least for the moment, most Israeli bombs have ceased to fall on Gaza. And if you ask the Palestinians in Gaza what they think about that, they will tell you that they have unbridled joy as a result of it for good and obvious reasons. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.